This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. Welcome everyone to the Combox. This is Morning Glory Show with Jarrod Kimber. I usually have lots of notes to go through, but I've been writing a Harry Brook piece all morning, so I'm a little bit behind on the actual notes. So I'll try and go through it as best I can remember. I think the most surprising thing is that the wicket was a little bit more zesty than we thought it was. Certainly once the ball got old and it was a long session also for the Australian bowlers, it changed a little bit. But right up until right up until Green bowled the no ball and then had the catch go between the keeper, there was plenty for the Australian bowlers, and then they started bowling a little bit more for the next session and the new ball, which also makes sense. They're also a little bit behind the over rate as well. So, there's a few different reasons for them to speed up. But up until that point, it seemed to be doing a little bit, right? There was the odd one that was bouncing. The odd one seemed to hit a crack. A little bit of lateral movement, nothing crazy or anything. And there were certainly times when it seemed to go dead straight, but every now and again there would be a little bit of nip or a little bit something going on. So I thought there was plenty in it. If you bowled well, Australia probably just couldn't keep the pressure on enough. And the Smith wicket is probably the big difference, right? He's gone on to play a innings that has certainly allowed for England to make a decent score. Up until that point, I thought Brook, again, can't play wide balls. It's actually incredible how often his head is so far from his hands and his body. Like he just plants himself in the crease. And when those wide balls come, he just hopes his hands will get him out of trouble. Something I've talked about before. It'll be mentioned a little bit in the piece later, but I have written about it quite a bit. Ben Stokes seems to have forgotten how to bat. And I don't mean he's in terrible form. I mean, he's literally forgotten how to bat. He's forgotten that you have to go through periods where you score quicker and try and put pressure back on and get off strike. It seems his only method at the moment is I'm going to block for as long as possible. And then once I've blocked for as long as possible, I will be able to score later on, which is, one way of doing things. It doesn't seem to be working all that well. He hasn't really made a lot of runs. I suppose he's chewed up some balls at times and got England back into slightly better positions, but a very bizarre situation. Again, though, of course, he was dismissed and it had to be the best ball he's ever seen. We knew he'd nicked it, didn't we? Because of the way he reacted to the ball. Oh, how brilliant a ball was that. And then I thought Smith looked a little bit jittery for a while there and was bound to get out eventually. But to go out to Marnus Labuschagne at that stage, I think they probably missed a trick. They didn't. I think Green bowled a little bit better than they thought he was going to. They didn't score enough off or quickly enough off Webster and Head to really put some pressure back on Australia. And then when Marnus came on, it's almost like they thought to themselves, well, we can't let him bowl. And especially he's going to bowl these ridiculous deliveries that we've got to take him down. But I don't know what you think you're going to do with that particular shot. It seemed like he was trying to hit it there. I need to go back and look at it a little bit, a few more times. But it felt like to me he was trying to hit it there. And it's like, well, you're not going to hit it over that fielder, are you? Like, what's the percentage chance of hitting it over that fielder in that position? Like, 12%? Like, it's an unlikely with that pace of bowler and bowling in that kind of delivery. It's very, very different. So, yeah. So there's a lot of things going on with that. We saw Australia I think it was quite interesting that Webster didn't bowl any spin. They went with the medium pace of him. I would have thought it would have made more sense for him probably to bowl his spin today, but they haven't really lent into his spin all that much. And so it feels like they've come in without a spinner. The fact that Head was bowling spin and Webster wasn't, which I thought was a little bit odd from Australia. The other big note I had about them was just the patience that they had when bowling to Brook, that he will eventually make a mistake. It's something that we see quite a bit with them. And as I said, there'll be a piece on the main channel later today about that. Anyway, Let's get to your questions because I think I've gone through everything I can remember from that session. Unless there was something else that I've missed. So I'm sure you guys will come up with a few more. Second says, how important was it for England's core to win 1-2 tests as away series? Could be a decade battle, as we have seen Australia is much closer to winning in England. How important was it for England's core to win 1-2 tests as away series? I think it's almost worse for England at a certain point that they've won these tests. Because I think, not that they're going to win this test, but that they won the last test and they've got a chance of winning this test. Because I think they'll learn the wrong things from it. So I don't think it's that important for their core. It's good for if I'm Joe Root and Ben Stokes. I just want to win some matches in Australia after all this time. But yeah, I think you can say it's also a bit of a negative. Anchor says, what's the secret behind the turnaround in conversion rate for Root? Is this pattern seen with other batters too post-COVID? No. To be honest, no one could really explain why he was going out before. I don't think I've ever seen an adequate explanation of why Root was going out so often before when he wasn't converting. But it's a very old era, like a very old issue now. You do see players though that don't have as good conversion rates. Like, the sort of Bradman conversion rate is like the gold standard, and there's a couple of other players that have that. But Root's probably more maybe he struggles to work between the 50 and 100 for some reason. I couldn't really give you an answer for it because we couldn't answer it when it was happening, and it's not really happening beforehand. Abby says, is England still pathetic besides Root's brilliance? I mean, Brook was pretty good in this match. But yeah, and then Smith probably got a little bit lucky. So it's very much Root and Brook, but that's... Take Alex Carey or Mitchell Starc out of Australia's team, how would they be doing in this series? Like, that's generally what you're supposed to do. Rat says, I think Smith is a good player, but I've genuinely never seen a worse wicket than that. It'd be very fascinating to hear him talk about it and to go through it. He does play some pretty odd shots, and he does seem to believe that he can kind of defeat any boundary, and I think he's proved quite a few times that isn't the case. Ramov says, what do you think of the Chappell article about the MCG disrespecting Test cricket? Do former players not understand the difficulties of modern-day batting and hanging in there is near impossible? No, they don't. They don't. No. It's very... I don't want to slag off every former player, but yeah, they don't really understand... that the game changes and that the players have changed and that there's a new delivery out there and that the techniques and pitches and everything else. I actually think, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, that there was a period of time when Greg Chappell was playing. I think it was Greg that wrote this article, wasn't it? I think there was a time when Greg Chappell was playing and the averages dropped massively. I think it was late 70s to early 80s. So some of that he wasn't in the side. But there was obviously something happened like at that point because it couldn't just have been the World Series cricket thing because it doesn't really make sense that a lot of the world's best bowlers weren't always playing for their teams either. So I don't think it was about World Series cricket. But there was this point where that happened. And the 80s was a low-scoring era in general, right? And Greg Chappell plays a lot of his career in the 80s. So they've been through it, some of these players before. I don't know. I mean, essentially at a certain point, I'm not taking a piss here, but former players are supposed to moan about cricket, about current cricket, or in almost any sport, and I see it all the time. It's a very consistent thing. Will Matthew says, is Jamie Smith wicket the worst bit of cricket the SCG has ever seen? I think that's probably pretty unlikely. I mean, it wasn't one of the best. It is worth saying, and this goes back to the whole Greg Chappell thing, go back and watch old cricket highlights if you ever get a chance. You're going to see some shit shots. So many shit shots. We've done this before on, I think we might have done it at Perth on day one of like England playing bad shots to start, or at the start of Ashes. There's a guy who, I want to say first ball of the Ashes series, tries to hook a ball and gets caught behind. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Right? So these things do happen. Abby says, so happy for Root. Final box ticked. Now the doubters can rest. We have an undoubted all-time great here. We did before this. It's kind of nonsense. Look, that he had been good enough against other great attacks that we don't have to put all of our, eggs into this one basket. We know how good he is, how consistent he's been around the world, how many runs he's made. I understand why people do what they do, and it's part of the way that sport works and everything else. But as I've said, it's disingenuous because we only think about it at the time, and then later on it sort of disappears. Right? Like the Ricky Ponting in India one has just disappeared, right? I know there's a few Indian fans who still talk about it, but the vast majority of people, when they're talking about how great Ricky Ponting is, very rarely bring that up, right? And so you get a bit obsessed with it for a little while, and then it floats away when your career is finished. Unless you've got like a Dougie Walters-like record, right? Or unless there's another reason why. I know, it's boring anyway. Is Smith the second worst shot of all time behind Shannon Gabriel's? No, as I said, plenty of bad shots in the history of cricket. Certainly not a, it's, we have to get used to this because players think they can clear these boundaries and maybe they can't. Abe says, what's the hole in Root's record now? No, he didn't have a hole in his record. He will also top the run scoring chart. Surely you can make the case to be better than Hobbs and Tendulkar. So I didn't have Root at 14 in the book because of Australia. Because I didn't think he was bad in Australia. I just think he hadn't made 100 in Australia. Right? He's not better than Hobbs or Tendulkar. I'm sorry. I mean, you'd have to be a fucking... You cannot look at their records and think that Root is a better player than them. It's just, it would be impossible to think that if you've gone through their records. I'm sorry. There's no one... I just don't believe that anyone who has done the work would come away with that idea. He's not even close to their records. Right? Jack Hobbs was like 50% better than other batters before World War One. Right? The World War happens and he comes back and he still dominates for another decade before batting finally catches up to him. He's like 15 years ahead of cricket. Joe Root isn't even the best test batter of of his era. Steve Smith is a better test batter than Joe Root. It's just not, this sort of stuff is just nonsense. Do the work, man. Just do the work. Oh my God. This is interesting. Dr. Daywalker says, do you think Root can pass Sachin in terms of runs and the number of centuries? Yeah, I think so. Root's a really interesting one because, a while back we talked about, kind of doing a podcast with him and everything else. Kind of, was there a way of setting up a system that we could help him? Because he already had the coaching academy. I was talking to some people involved in his team and everything. And it's like, they were like, he's not someone who spends all day watching cricket or thinking about cricket. And they were saying from a podcast point of view, that might be the issue, blah, blah, blah. But he does seem, so he's not like Raul Dravid or Mike Hussey or those sorts of guys, right? From that perspective. But he is the sort of guy that does seem to want to be out there batting all the time and really enjoys his cricket. And outside of the captaincy thing that went a bit to shit. So he's got a method that I think can work very late in his career. Like, I mean, eventually he's going to have a drop off because everyone does. But, looking at him technically, like Steve Smith was the one that we all thought technically might have an issue. Coley probably came at us, maybe we should have worked out Coley before. But those are normal things of older players. But you look at Joe Root's method and you're like, a bit like Kane Williamson, it's just getting off strike a lot, right? Like you should be able to keep doing that unless something massively goes. If his knees go and his bat path changes, right? Or if his back gets really stiff, or he doesn't see the ball as well. All these things can happen. But if that doesn't happen, then and they inland play so much cricket. We've done a whole podcast on this before, man. A whole video on it before. Where we looked into it mathematically, where you could see how it makes a lot of sense. Ronald says pitch suddenly becomes spicy, moisture. Yeah, I think the moisture played a small part. It doesn't look as good a pitch as I think we thought it was, maybe in that middle session yesterday, right? And maybe some of that has to come down to good batting as well, but it just doesn't look as good a batting pitch as we thought it was yesterday. So we might just be wrong, right? I'm not there, so I'm not that close to the wicket, but, we're all watching it on TV. But even the people who seem to be there seem to have thought that the wicket was better than it was. So I don't know. Also, this Australian bowling attack, they are very good at just being patient, right? And just waiting and bowling quite well, waiting for their moments. But it felt like it was more than that, didn't it? I think that's, if we're being honest. William says, why was Australia in such a rush to squeeze in extra overs of field from Head and Marnus? The second new ball is due just after lunch, sorry. So they're trying to get there as quickly as possible. They fell behind the over rate as well. So those two things are the reason why. Abby says, Marnus is quicker than Bo. Why do they even need Bo? There's a lot of, I know there's probably a little bit of piss take here, but like Marnus Labuschagne is someone who can bowl every now and again, and he's going to bowl these sort of extreme spells. And we've seen it quite a lot from him. Sometimes it's been horrible. Sometimes it's worked a little bit, was it against India? He suddenly became their bouncer bowler for a little while. Bo Webster has 192 first-class wickets at 35. It's not about pace, right? It's about the fact he's 6'8", 6'7", or I don't know, bloody huge. Has a huge wingspan and can give you a little bit of bowling when it comes to pace and speed. You could say it was a mistake to pick him, and I was a bit surprised if he was going to bowl that he was bowling seam today. Like yesterday, no issue. Today, I was like, everyone else, they've got enough other options. Surely he's a better spinner than Travis Head. So you would use him for that. But yeah. Seb says, also, is Joe Root the very best in the world in the past few years? Yeah, I think Bayram's made this point quite a bit. That, in the last, 4 years? 5 years? 6 years now? He's probably done more than Steve Smith. Steve Smith's had some great moments. But Steve Smith really, was probably the 2010s. Yeah, 2010s was more his era. And Root's been better, I think, since 2020. I haven't looked at the numbers, though, so I don't know how Smith goes up. But then Smith had that purple patch again recently. But he was opening and he was struggling for a while and everything. So, yeah, I would say that seems... I mean, what's Jaiswal and Brook, I suppose, are the other two? Off the top of my head, am I missing someone else? I mean... It's basically Temba Bavuma's world that we're all living in at the moment. Oh, Agaji says, Joe Root's the best batter in recent times. And thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I think most people, again, Smith is just hard to kind of get a finger on, right? And Williamson's still making runs, but still has some issues against some of the better attacks. I don't think there are many people at the moment. It'd be interesting to know who you would pick if you were just picking for tomorrow. I kind of think you would pick Root at the moment, which is also a chance for him to catch up to Smith eventually. If he keeps playing at the level he is and does it for years and Smith does it, right? There's always a chance that he can come back. Amal says, read something amazing that post-COVID Root, 24 centuries, is third on England's all-time list behind Root himself and Cook. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about Root from an all-timer perspective is he doesn't have a very good peak, So, like, as in the standard peak that batters have. So most players between the age of 28, 32, that sort of period is when they absolutely go ballistic, right? Now, I'm not talking about the sort of Ricky Ponting, Virat Kohli, I'm missing someone here, Hashim Amla type guys. But I'm just talking about in general. Like, even if you're great, you're probably at your absolute best there. Root was kind of a little bit mid at that point for him, right? And now he seems to be getting his peak. Like, this feels like it's been his peak the last, I don't know how many years. I'd have to go back and look at the full number. But I feel like this is more his peak at the moment. And, we've seen that as with certain players and everything else. Where are we here? Oh, we've already done Jamie Smith quite a bit. Power on this pitch, Ronaldo, is really, really interesting, because we didn't expect it to play like the way it has today, right? So I think power on this pitch is fascinating. I think if I'm England, I'm like, well, and this is the big if. If we bowl well, we've got plenty of chances here. There's still something in this surface. What will be interesting is what happens with the second new ball. I think if the second new ball moves around a little bit here, I think I'd be pretty happy with what England have so far. Where are we here? Shrikant says, can Root be rated ahead of Hammond? Hammond wasn't a great player at fast bowling, and his record in Australia was significantly worse than his career average. Yeah, he's close. I think... Oh, what have I pressed here? The wrong button. I think when we wrote the book, he was about level with Hammond. Let me just have a quick look at Hammond. Hammond was a dog, man. This whole thing about not being good against fast bowling, you got to remember that it wasn't something that came up all that often. Hammond still averages 58. Let's have a look. Versus Australia, Hammond averages 52. And in Australia, Hammond averages 62. So I'm not sure. So his record in Australia was significantly worse than his career average. No. It wasn't. I think Hammond averages more away than home, doesn't he? Yeah, he averages 50 at home and 66 away from home. Some of that is the Kiwis, but even if you take the Kiwis out, yeah, I think... Oh, God, I'd have to go back through the book, guys. But they're pretty close to the book, and I would say that if you gave Root a couple more years, you would put him ahead of Hammond. I think that's fair. At the moment, I think Sutcliffe and Hammond just have incredible records. Right? Just ridiculously incredible records. And so it is hard for Root to get past them. But it's not just them. It's that whole group of sort of Callis, Sobers, Kumar Sangakkara. I'm missing someone else as well. Like in that area, there's a bunch of them who have really, really fantastic records and quite often average a lot more than Root as well. Now, Root is going to make so many runs, and he might go on to play for another 4 or 5 years. That's when you start to catch those guys. And there is, once you get to the top, outside of Steve Smith, there aren't many guys who don't have longevity in that list. And so there is a certain point where longevity makes a big difference, because, if you can be 99 out of 100 for 15 years, and the other guy is like 100 out of 100 for 10 years, then obviously you're going to go with the guy who's 99 out of 100. It might even be even if they're 93 out of 100, right? So longevity plays a part, and Root's career is not very long at the moment. It may end up being very long. So that could change some of those positions as well on some of those guys. What else do we have here? Farhan says, what do you think about KKR dropping Mustafiza? Do you think the Indian government's influence in the BCCI is out of hand? I haven't followed that story enough, so I don't know what the most recent part of it is. But it's really fascinating because, we are in a situation now where you've got these franchise leagues and you've got these incredibly powerful owners, but you also have geopolitics. And the cricket boards themselves are not that powerful, right? But there are powerful people on both sides of this, and I don't think this is the last time we're going to see something along these lines. I think we're going to see things like that before. Jim says, so we're suggesting the batters can't protect their wicket anymore, because I certainly don't agree with that. So Jim, we had a period where batters went really, really defensive around 2021, 2022, and the batting averages kept dropping. And then the batters started attacking a little bit, and there's a slight bump back up with batting averages after that. It's not that players can't do it, but you have to understand how much has changed within the game. You can't use your pad anymore, right, within batting, because DRS just does not allow for that. The bowlers bowl fuller, so they keep the stumps in play more. The bowlers are more accurate at high pace than they've ever been before. There's a delivery that's bowled at the moment that doesn't give you any clues, so you don't get the old clues of outswing or anything else. The ball that they are using, this wobble ball, also doesn't allow for the ball doesn't degrade at the same rate that it used to, so you get more seam movement for longer in the innings. And this particular ball that they're using at the moment has been reinforced. The pitches are quite often have more spin and grass on them because of teams trying to get World Test Championship at home. I'm sorry, but to think that players can just grind this out is ridiculous, because really good defensive batters were not being able to do that. Right? From 2017 onwards, Cheteshwar Pujara, Craig Brathwaite, Dean Elgar, you name them, right? The guys who were left who were defensive batters also have stopped making runs. This isn't just attacking players. And in fact, some of the attacking players are the ones who have found a way to make runs because they're putting pressure back on the bowlers. You can't just sit there and block anymore. I really don't believe you can. I think if you do it, if you're like a Joe Root, Kane Williamson, trying to think of someone else, a very good strike rotator, there's an element of that you can use. But there aren't that many of those in the history of the game. That's not that big a thing. Oops. Ben says, why do commentators in a series as big as this say Boland and other bowls leg and off cutters? Did they generally not understand wobble seam? Some of them don't. I would actually say, going back a long period of time, I wrote about this in 2008 on my blog, that generally, if a ball seams in one direction or the other, we say off cutter or leg cutter, and that's not what the bowler is bowling. An off cutter or a leg cutter is a specific ball where you're rolling your fingers on one side or the other, or the back of the ball, whatever you're trying to do. You know, using your fingers to be able to move the ball, right? Most times, bowlers are bowling dead straight and just trying to hit the seam and let the seam do that for them. And yet, through that entire history, forget wobble ball, pre-wobble ball, people were saying, oh, great off cutter there. Well, that's not an off cutter. Sometimes it is, right? But it's very rare. Leg cutter is a delivery we hear mentioned so much on comms. You tell me how often you have seen a test bowler come in and bowl a genuine leg cutter. It just doesn't happen. It's just not a thing. And yet we hear it again and again. So yeah, it is just one of those things, I think, that it's shorthand. There is an element of I think we're still a long way away when it comes to being really good with commentary and everything else. So yeah, I think there is an element of I think there's an element of cricket commentary is probably still not at the level that we want it to be. I remember Peter Della Penna once saying, "Oh, you know, baseball commentators are so much better than cricket commentators because they call the pitch." But you can't actually, when you're commentating, always tell exactly what the ball is, right? You're a lot further away. And a baseball, you know, when it dips or when it does it so dramatically. And then sometimes on the first view, you think something swung and it's actually seamed, or vice versa. Or it's done a little bit of both, right? Not to mention, you've got a little bit of extra bounce. Sometimes you'll see a batter come down the wicket and you'll think that the spinner has slowed the ball down. It hasn't. It's actually it is, you know, as someone who's done quite a bit of commentary, and I try and get it right because I want the fans to know exactly kind of what has happened. That's not always easy to do in real time. So I think that the off cutter, leg cutter has become a bit of a shorthand for that kind of stuff. And so I do think it's a little bit different. Hooves says T20 is full of mixed pace deliveries and cutters. Yeah, exactly. So when we say off cutters in T20 cricket, we're almost always being accurate with it. Right. And when we say off cutter in test cricket, we're almost never being accurate with it. They're completely different balls. An off cutter in T20 cricket is usually pretty easy to see because the whole hand comes around the side. So if you're commentating in a T20 game, it's so much easier to call an off cutter, and you're usually fairly accurate with it. A test off cutter is probably more to do with just running your fingers down a little bit to the side. You're not breaking your entire wrist. And so it's hard for the commentators to even pick that up. And on top of that, as I said before, before the wobble ball, most balls that were called off cutters were just hitting the seam. That is not an off cutter. That is hitting the seam. And so, again, that is really hard. And if you think about the history of cricket, how far the commentators are from the hand, the fact that the ball can do multiple things. In baseball, if a ball swerves in one direction, it's because you have done one thing to it. In cricket, a ball can swerve in one direction, and it can be multiple different options. There's a lot more scope for deliveries in cricket because of the pitch, because of the seam, than there is in baseball. So it's a very, very different kind of things. Someone's just said, Venkatesh Prasad. I would say he's one of the last guys who regularly bowled leg cutters in Test cricket. That's how far away we are talking about, right? We do see them occasionally, and leg cutters have come back into T20 cricket a little bit, but it is a very, very different when it comes to those sorts of things. I think the great man Marnus is going to come in again. It'd be great if he came back and bowled leg spin now, wouldn't it? Abby says, when we see you on comms on these elite networks, you are much better than some of these ex-cricketers. Look, I think the ex-cricketers could be much better as well. Don't get me started on production and how much they train them and everything else. I'm not likely to do any TV in the short term. Short term, I would say, is what, 2 to 3 years. Eventually, if you stick around long enough, I might get a go, but I don't think it's likely. I certainly haven't had any conversations. I did have an offer a while back for TV, but it clashed with another thing that I'd already picked up, so I haven't done that. But yeah. I'm fine. More than happy with Combox as Marnus comes in and bowls a dog shit ball down the leg side. And that's a good way to finish this show. We'll be back after the close of play, unless rain happens again and I fall asleep. And there'll be a video on the main channel as well, so you can certainly go and see that. But I'm Jarrod Kimber. This has been the Morning Glory, and thank you. Please subscribe to Combox and do all those things, and we'll see you again very soon. Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.